Hello, this is Cindy McDonald. I'm instructor for UCLA, and this is another one of my series of interviews of subject matter experts talking about college and college admissions. And today with me I have Steve Syverson, and Steve is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at the University of Washington Bothell. Welcome, Steve. We're glad to have you.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been involved in college admissions?
Well, I started in 1978, so I'm closing on 40 years here. I started at Pomona College out in Southern California, and then after about 5 years there, moved to be the Dean of Admission and Financial Aid back at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. And originally, I expected I would move around every few years, but ended up staying there for 28 years because we really liked Appleton and Lawrence, and it was a fabulous place to raise our kids. Then I went into sort of a brief period of retirement. I was working a lot with the American Institute on Certified Educational Planners that offers a CEP credential, kind of the only national credential for independent educational consultants or college counselors in schools. And I worked with them for several years while my sister was passing away. She had ALS, so she was passing away. And that's why we moved back out to Southern California. And I served on the NACAC board during that time for the second time. So I've been fairly involved with NACAC and kind of the professional organizations, Wisconsin ACAC, Western ACAC. And then about 6 months ago, in the spring of 2016, I came out of retirement and took on a really interesting position in a very different kind of institution. I'm up here at UW Bothell, which is a public institution, and for me was a radical change from a school like Lawrence, where we recruited students from all over the world, and virtually every student who came to Lawrence was the only student in the freshman class from their high school because we were so widespread. And here at Bothell, we get 85% of our students from the two-county area, from King and Snohomish County up here around Seattle. It's a very access-oriented institution. About half of our students are first-generation college bound. About half the students are students of color, and about half of our students are transfers from community colleges. So it's a completely different kind of environment than Lawrence was. And for me, it's a nice way to kind of round out my career, having worked at very different kinds of institutions, from highly selective privates to this very broad access, mission-driven University of Washington campus.
Oh, that's very exciting. That's very interesting. In my background, I've worked with AVID students for many years, and those are also first generation, underrepresented, and I know the importance of having an institution that meets their needs. So these students that you work with and other students that we work with as high schools are often told take the best classes as they can. So when the schools vary, like I know a lot of our high schools in our area don't offer a lot of AP or IB classes, how does a college determine what those best classes are?
Typically, if we are unfamiliar with the high school, we'll take a look at the high school profile. Typically, schools will send those along with transcripts, or they're available on the website. So if we're concerned about it, we'll take a look at that and take a look at the kinds of courses that are available. Obviously, you get some schools that have an IB curriculum or something, and it's pretty straightforward. It shows up on the transcript. Some schools that offer an extensive AP curriculum, same kind of thing. You can see that they're AP or honors courses, and typically on the transcript, a school will list the various kinds of honors or weighted kinds of courses they have. But I would say something a little different here. I think there's become a preoccupation with a lot of students of trying to take like all the AP classes they can possibly jam into their schedule. And the reality is that's not really a good strategy. There are very few institutions that will be impressed by having 15 AP classes. What we're really saying is we want to see students who challenge themselves, who don't shirk or shy away from the more challenging classes just to preserve a higher grade point average. So we want to see students who are motivated and who challenge themselves in terms of whatever curriculum is available from their particular high school. But at the same time, we just assume that students have some kind of balance to their life, and so they challenge themselves academically, but they also ought to be developing good social relationships with friends, and they should be taking advantage of extracurricular activities. And these students who become so preoccupied with just taking absolutely every course that's an honors or an accelerated or an AP or whatever kind of course, because they think this is the way to impress the colleges, they need to recognize that colleges are looking for people who are interesting and engaged people, not just for the people who grind through every possible most advanced class they can possibly find.
I think that would be very comforting for a lot of students and parents too, because they do get caught up in this, oh, you've got to take more and more and take the hardest schedule you can. And that's very refreshing to hear about expecting that balance, because I know a lot of my students end up being up till midnight or 1 o'clock many times because they're having to do homework on all these AP classes after doing sports. And so that's definitely something that we can do as counselors and advisors, is help students to be able to create that balance and also communicate that to parents.
Well, some of the deans of students in some of the more selective colleges talk about the fact that students will arrive there kind of psychically exhausted. They've been pushing so hard during high school that they get to college and they're just kind of exhausted, and that's not healthy on lots of fronts.
Right.
And so, my advice to a student is, whatever environment you are in, if your school doesn't offer a bunch of AP courses and things like that, colleges recognize that. We look and we say, within the environment that was available to the student, did they reasonably challenge themselves? But at the same time, we're not looking for people who are just neurotically single-focused on nothing but academics.
Good. So you mentioned a profile. So tell me what is a college looking for in a profile? What makes a good profile?
Well, it's helpful if we get some representation of both the kinds of programming that's available to a student. Again, a profile sets a context for the college. The college is able to look at it and kind of understand what percentage of these students are particularly college bound, for instance. Mm-hmm. If you're in one school where 100% of the students go on to four-year colleges, and you look at another school where only 40% of the students are considering even a 2-year or a 4-year environment, that are going on to any kind of post-secondary education. Those are very different environments, and colleges try to read applications from students and understand the context that student is coming from, and what's the kind of general character of the other students, the strength of the kind of academic program, but also who are the other students around you, and what's the profile of those students, because that gives you better interpretation in terms of both the grades and what kinds of choices the student has made in choosing their curriculum, if you understand something about the high school. So a high school that gives some range, a high school profile that gives a range of information that tells us about the curriculum, kind of how many courses are advanced or accelerated kinds of courses, what choices did the student have, but then also tells us something about the students at the school, where they come from, their kind of backgrounds, where they go on to in terms of colleges that they're looking at, something in terms of the extra curriculum that is available at the high school. Some schools have a very rich extracurricular program, some less so. All those things give us a context, and so that's what the school is trying to do, is tell us something about who they are and what they've offered to their students, so that we can understand the students' choices better.
That makes a lot of sense, and having that context is the key thing. And then also it helps families and us as counselors to be able to tell parents and students that you're not going to be judged against these other students that have more opportunities. You're going to be judged against what your choices and opportunities were within your high school.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true.
And so, yeah, although I recall one time I had a conversation with a a pretty distinct private school, and I asked her that question, and she said, well, we'll have the profile. I was like, well, you're assuming all high schools have a profile.
Right.
So, so our role as counselors and parents oftentimes is to take this information. I had to do that with my own children's high school. It's like, here, where's your profile? Oh, we don't know what that is. Okay, well, let me help you. So that's another advocacy role that we can play, especially in our communities at the public schools. So also, this leads to the question about how do the students let the colleges know that they're interested? So, we hear about demonstrated interest, let the schools know that you're interested. What does that really mean, and how does that really play out on the college side?
Well, I have really mixed feelings about the emphasis on demonstrated interest nowadays, because I think it's overblown. I think every college likes to be loved, and so we like when the student clearly is interested in our institution. And you'll see a number of college essays now have moved to asking some kind of a specific question about what prompted your interest, or what in particular appeals to you about our college. The thing that's important about that is that the student, we're hoping to work with students who are thoughtful in their college choices. And so if they don't really know anything about our campus and our institution, that doesn't suggest that they're being particularly thoughtful. The same thing might be true in an interview. If you sit with a student in an interview and their first question about that they ask is, well, are you co-ed, or something like that is just a really simplistic question, that's of concern to the college, because then it feels like this student must just be kind of randomly picking names out that they and they haven't really thought about what kind of environment they're after. And that's one of the things, is we're looking for students who will come and be happy at our institution, be successful at our institution. And so to some extent, that's dependent upon the student having done their research on the front end. The preoccupation with showing demonstrated interest to colleges, I think, has cropped up in the last decade or so, because particularly some very selective colleges, have started making a pitch about the need to demonstrate interest. And so then you get all kinds of wacky things that people are doing, like, sending a dozen chocolate chip cookies that I just made to the admission office to show how interested I am, or things like that. And you get students going through almost game playing to demonstrate their interest. And the college is not really looking for that kind of generic interest. Once a student designs a plan to show how interested they are in 20 colleges that they applied to, it starts to fall apart. So I have mixed feelings about this, because the primary reason a college is really concerned about demonstrated interest is that it allows them to admit a smaller number of students, because they choose the ones who are more likely to come because they are seriously interested. However, a student should have enough background about the college to be able to respond thoughtfully to questions that are essay questions, to interview questions. A student is seriously interested in a college and has a way of expressing why they feel that college is particularly a good match for them. That's the best way to demonstrate interest. And if there is a regional counselor, if there's someone who is assigned to their territory and is the person they're likely to deal with, having contact with that with that counselor in a meaningful way. If you have legitimate questions to ask about the institution, take advantage of that. That is a way to demonstrate interest. But don't just be dreaming up bizarre questions just so that you can send them an email.
That's exactly, and I think oftentimes we tend to make mountains out of molehills for that reason. So how much does that demonstrated interest, when students do that kind of thing, how much does that influence the admissions decision? Where does that come into play?
Well, there's, like so many things in college admission, there isn't an answer to that question, because it's idiosyncratic to the individual colleges. Some institutions make a point of it really doesn't carry any weight whatsoever. Other institutions, particularly those who are trying to lower their admit rates and increase their yield rates and things like that, may make a big deal out of it. And they may say, it's gotten to be where more colleges, I think, are being transparent about it and actually indicating on their website or somewhere in conjunction with their application materials that if you're seriously interested, you should make sure that we understand that and demonstrate your interest. Demonstrating your interest for some students, obviously, it's difficult to go and visit a campus, but that's one of the best ways to demonstrate interest, is to show that you have enough interest to go and visit a campus. For a student who doesn't really have the financial resources to be able to fly across the country and show up on campus, obviously, asking for a Skype interview or having an alumni interview or making sure that you meet with the representative when they are in your area, all of those things are valuable ways to do it. But again, there isn't one right answer to how much difference does it make or where does it factor in, because every college is different that way.
So people talk about, I hear comments or references to stealth applicants. So where and especially now with the proliferation of the Common App, so many colleges on the Common App, the Coalition App is starting to come in to, it'll contribute to that in the future. All of a sudden, now as a student, I can apply to 15 schools and just mark them off on the Common App, and the college has never heard from me. So how do colleges look at when all of a sudden they pop up, here's an applicant they've never heard of?
Well, again, there isn't an answer because every college is different. The reality is a lot of colleges now have a substantial portion of their applications, 25, 30% of their applicants, that they did not have that student's name and address prior to the arrival of the application. That's the first time they've really heard of this student. But the thing is, back when I started in admissions, that was a rarity because you had to contact the admission office to get them to mail you out the paper application, and you would mail that back in and things. And so the admission office controlled the flow of information in the application, the access to the application and things. Nowadays, with the internet, a student may have done substantial research on a college, and they may truly know a great deal about that campus and still never have made direct contact with the admission office in advance of the application because they haven't had to. All their questions were being answered elsewhere, out on the internet. And so it's not surprising that we have so many stealth applications. I think some institutions may feel that that's a lack of demonstrated interest. But again, I think most institutions will look at it in a context. If they're looking at a student who's from a lower kind of level of affluence and they're a long distance from the campus and they haven't come to campus and things, that's probably okay. They'll take that in context. If the school comes to visit your high school, if the college is coming to visit your high school, you should pay attention to that and make every effort to go and introduce yourself to whoever's coming and visiting on the part of the college, and introduce yourself, or go to one of the college fairs. If they're at the college fair, go up and introduce yourself and express your interest, because whatever you can do to stand out as a person to a person who will be reading the application on the other end, that'll be to your advantage. We will have students who sometimes, they're taking AP Calculus during the time that we're there doing a high school visit, but they'll send a note. They'll leave a note with the counselor saying, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to visit, but I'm very interested in Lawrence University. Here's who I am. And that can be helpful too. That's a nice demonstration of interest. Helps to combat being a stealth applicant in a sense.
Good. So being on this side of the desk, what do you wish counselors knew about college admissions? What kind of message should we leave with our counselors?
Well, I'm not sure it's what I'd like them to know so much about it, but I do have a concern that we get into a certain kind of vocabulary, and counselors will talk about, for instance, they'll talk about the SAT or ACT as, I have this really smart student. They got a thus and such on the SAT. Well, the SAT isn't an intelligence test, and so we shouldn't use language like smart and intelligent to tie out to these admission tests. That's not what they are. All it does is demonstrate that you're a little ignorant about what these tests really assess. And when they talk about colleges, to treat colleges monolithically, as though we are all the same and we have the same policies. And they say, well, colleges will, like our earlier conversation, colleges want you to show demonstrated interest, or colleges want you to choose the toughest classes you can find. That's not necessarily true. Colleges come in all sizes and shapes, and I think it's unfortunate that that we kind of treat them together. One of the joys of American higher education is that we have such diversity of colleges, from little tiny Bible colleges to regional colleges, like places like I'm at now that serve students exceptionally well, but most of our students come from a very close-knit kind of area, all close to campus. Other schools draw from all over the world. Colleges and people have lapsed into this idea that the selectivity of the college, how tough it is to get into a place, is clearly an indication of how good that college is. And that drives colleges then to behave in ways that try to run up their applicant pools. In my ideal world, at Lawrence, I would have had 350 applications and we would have admitted them all and they all would have come, but that would have made us look completely non-selective. On the flip side, what it means is there was an extremely good matching process going on of the students picking out that Lawrence was a great match, and that being true, and us saying, that's great, why don't you come, and you come on in. But we would be deemed unselective then, and suddenly that would drop way down in people's estimation of the college. So to whatever extent we can try to de-game this process and have counselors help students to understand that there are lots of good places for them, that the place that they have never heard of until they start into the college search process may turn out to be absolutely a wonderful match, and that particularly if students are looking at selective places, that there isn't one perfect college. There may be a place you fall in love with, but the reality is there are a whole batch of places that can provide you with an outstanding education, and it has more to do with the advantage you take of the opportunities that the college provides you than it does with what the name of the college is, or whether you got into a particular college or not. It's there are great resources at lots of colleges, and you can get a great education anywhere, and you can get a poor education essentially anywhere too. It all depends on how well you connect with the institution, and that's why finding that right match is really the critical issue for you.
Oh, that's well said. Well said. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the best fit that we lose sight of that it is the initiative of the student. And I talk to my students about school enthusiasm. And if you have
That's
a strong...
great term.
Yeah.
School enthusiasm, that's a great term.
Well, it comes from Steve Antonoff. It's part of his college match. And so if a student has their own motivation, they can articulate, this is my goal. It's not because my mom and dad want me to go or because I don't know what else to do with myself. Here are the reasons I want to go to college. It's like, it doesn't really matter which college you land at. There's not just one perfect school. You are going to make it happen for yourself. You're going to make this your own experience. And I think that's really key. And it becomes an important aspect. So thank you. I think that was very well said.
Yeah, I think focusing on a good match as compared to the perfect match, sometimes we get so fixated on believing there is one perfect match out there, and if you don't get in, then your life is over.
Right.
It's not true. It's just not true.
Right. I agree. There's definitely a balance. Going back to the balance of life, there's a balance on the process too, and finding schools that are going to meet your needs and doing that self-reflection as a student is important so that you do end up a place that matches your needs, but it doesn't end up having to be just one place or nothing. So,
the college search, sorry, one more comment. The college search process, you just touched on it, can be one of the most interesting self-awareness or introspective processes that you ever go through. And it's a time that students should seize it, not to just focus on the college that they're going to get into, but in thinking about themselves and their learning styles and what will make a difference to launching them on a particular trajectory. What's really important to them. And a lot of students haven't really thought about that much. And they can use the college search process to do that. To help them understand themselves in really tremendously empowering ways.
I agree. And I think that's our role as counselors, whether we're in a public school or a private school or an independent, is to help facilitate that and provide opportunities for students to do that self-reflection. And the sooner we can start on it, the more time students have. To come visit campuses, see what's there, what the opportunities are, and programs and, institutes and all those different things that they've never ever been exposed to before. So
It's a lot like going shopping for a jacket. There are a whole lot of jackets that are the right size, but some just feel better. That's what you're looking for. It's the place that emotionally calls out to you as an institution.
And that's why the visits are so key, because a student can walk on campus and say, yeah, I can see myself here, or no, it looks good on paper, but I just can't see myself here. So, but it's hard. Not all students can do that. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Sorry, I'll miss you at now.
Take care.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.